we have a great program today. We're going to give you a short, just like overview of the Student Journalism Challenge, since it's our first time doing it as a Student Reporting Labs. And then we'll get into a great conversation with some student reporters and professional reporters on the Student Reporting Labs team, to kind of share how you can get started with finding your story, and some tips as you get started on video projects. So again, this is part of the Ready, Set, Go workshop series, and today, during this session, we're focused on video. So if you're interested in also audio and print workshops, those are happening later today and tomorrow. Welcome to come to all of them, but they will have similar themes. And yeah, so if you are here and you haven't heard of Student Reporting Labs before, or you're new, just a quick overview. We are a youth journalism program nationwide that focuses on video storytelling, community journalism, and civic engagement, which means we love student and youth stories and voices and perspectives, and that's what we are all about. So we are here to support students, amplify student voices, and celebrate great student work, and also help support student teachers and educators to help support you. So that's what we're here to do today. And that's also what we're hoping for with this new Student Journalism Challenge. So in the past, Student Reporting Labs have been around for 13 years, but this is our first competition that's like this. But we're excited because it's also opening it up to different formats, like print and audio that we haven't worked with as much in the past. So what is the Student Journalism Challenge? You found your way here, so you may have seen it at least a little bit, but to give you the rundown, to be eligible, you should be 13 to 18 years old, and you should be a student, and you can submit for like any type of journalism that is print, video, or audio. So you kind of want to choose your format first, and then kind of develop a piece of journalism that responds to the theme, my education, my future. We know that's really broad, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have a workshop like this to talk about what that means, and some ideas for types of themes and stories that you could cover kind of that connect to that theme. And we're going to be accepting submissions all the way through December 2nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And we hope to get as many student submissions as possible. We want everyone to have an opportunity to get published and win prizes. We'll have 10 like honorable mentions in each category of print, video, and audio, and 2 winners in each category. And those will be announced sometime in early 2023. And you can find all this information and lots more resources to help as you start and work through the process of your project at studentjournalismchallenge.org. And if you have questions after this, you can also send us an email, and I'll drop that in the chat later. And as we get started, if you want to drop in the chat where you're coming from today, and where you are in your project, we'd love to hear that too, because we're a pretty small group, and we'll have chances to kind of talk through some of your questions as well. Now I'm going to hand it over to our speakers for the day. So we have Kate Nakamura, who's a senior and a Student Reporting Labs reporter, and she's also host of the special Our New Normal a few years ago. Mohammad Pasha, who's the SRL, one of our SRL Youth Media Producers, and Marie Cusick, who's our Editorial Director. So Marie, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. So I'm really excited to talk to Kate and Mohammad and share some tips about making great video stories. I'll just briefly introduce myself. So I'm the editorial director, and I work with students and teachers and the SRL staff to like take great ideas and transform them into powerful stories. And as Christine said, our whole team, we're super passionate about elevating the voices of young people. And that's what I'll pass it to Kate. Do you want to just introduce yourself too?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kate Nakamura. I'm from the island of Kauai in the state of Hawaii. I'm a senior, and I've been working with SRL since my freshman year through rapid responses, participating in the SRL Academy in 2020, and co-hosting the Our New Normal special back in January. It's so great to be here and see everyone.
And Mohammed, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, what's up, everybody? Mohammad Pasha, Youth Media Producer, located in Washington, D.C. Good to see everybody.
Okay, so before we get started really talking with Mohammed and Kate and going through some great tips on how to make a great video, I just thought one of the things we see a lot with students who are new to journalism is just they're really passionate about a topic. So maybe they care a lot about climate change, maybe they care about immigration, whatever it is, but we really want to encourage them to take a topic and make it a great story. So we're just going to play a clip of a story that Kate made for us a few years ago, right when the pandemic started, and everyone was really still staying home a lot. And this is just about, she took the topic of the pandemic disrupting tourism and made it into a great story. So let's just check it out.
Since Hawaii is really based off of tourism, and economy really depends on it, and especially my workplace.
Class of 2020 high school graduate Gerald Salute's road to the future was looking clear and bright.
Well, I work at Jack Carter Helicopters as a mechanic helper, and that's located at the Lihue Airport. That's where all the helicopter hangars are. My job was to just watch the helicopters at the end of the day when they land, and just basically just wash the hangars, clean the hangar, and just maintain the helicopter.
But the COVID-19 pandemic left Gerald laid off and his road to the future a bit unclear.
I was pretty bummed because I actually liked my job, and it was like, that was a really good first job since like being a high schooler. Like that's really a unique job for someone to be working at a helicopter tour place. And I was really fortunate to have a job like that. I was planning after graduation to work full time at the place, Jack Carter. So I was able to like gain some money before I leave off for college, because college is going to like be really expensive. So I wanted to have like some money as a backup when I leave.
But Gerald's future wasn't the only thing that was left unclear. Even Hawaii as a whole, is very economically reliant on tourism. In 2019, Kauai received 551,542 visitors from January to May alone. And in these past couple of months, Kauai has only received almost half of that amount. As the states and counties' COVID-19 rules are starting to ease up, large numbers of tourists returning to Kauai are in the works.
So recently, last week, one of the bosses called me up to, like, if I still wanted to go back. And I told him that I was planning to come back, but he said, I'm going to come back when I'm ready. And I asked him, like, what I'll be doing there, since obviously there's no tourists flying in the helicopters. So they just, I guess what they've been doing is like cleaning the hangar, like really deep cleaning it, and I guess preparing for the economy to open up again.
With the return of tourists also comes concerns and worries for Gerald.
Like, basically only tourists go to ride the helicopters. So if we were to open up, like fully come back, I would just want to be sure that I'm going to be safe, and the people I'm interacting with and like touching around, being with, I won't be, like, my health won't be in jeopardy.
For the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs, I'm Kate Nakamura in Lihue, Hawaii.
Great job, Kate. I just want to ask, we gave you that big topic of tourism being affected by the pandemic. So how did you find that story? You really told his story.
Yeah, so just starting off during the 2020 Academy, our big topic was the pandemic, and it was very daunting to take on an idea and like a topic that was so prevalent and so big during that time. So in my group, Turtle Sync, we looked in our communities and tried to find a common denominator with all of us, and that was the economy and how COVID-19 affected it. Especially here in Hawaii, like I said in the story, we're so reliant on tourism. So then I wanted to think big, hula performers, all this and that, when really I just talked with my friends, talked to other people, finding out what they were doing during the pandemic and how they were affected by it. And that's how I talked to my friend Gerald, who's in the story. And he kind of told me how he was laid off and how it's affecting him and like he's trying to figure out his next steps. So I was thinking really big when my story idea was in actuality right in front of me.
Yeah, that's great advice. And like Mohammed, you talk to students all over the country and have help them take those big ideas and narrow it into stories. Like, what advice do you give to the students that you work with?
Yeah, the advice I would give is usually just what Kate did, which is looking at specifically like where she's from, what's happening in her community, because she took this really big issue, right? She took an issue of what's happening in the pandemic. Everybody was affected by the pandemic. Everybody's economies were affected. So she's looked at how is it affecting the people in my community? Well, specifically Hawaii, we rely on tourism. So she focused in on that. And then she focused even in more on her island. What kind of tourism economy is happening here? It's happening with this helicopter company. Okay, well, who are the people working at the company? It's a young person. So she just kept chopping down at this story and making it more and more focused. So whenever you start with a big topic, it's cool that you want to do something about climate change, do something about the economy, but keep chopping away and finding a way for it to be doable for you.
That's great advice. So Kate, if you were doing the student journalism challenge and our topic is my education, my future, so just all about education issues, that's huge. Where would you begin? Do you have any advice?
I think I would just start talking to people in my community, specifically maybe school community, talking to teachers and even talking to students. You know, you only know so much about what's happening in your circle and what's going on with you. But when you talk to someone, you might figure out like, oh, I had no idea this was happening. That does relate to the topic. And again, just thinking big, but then making it smaller and more local to what's around you.
One thing I loved about the story about the helicopter company was, if folks remember, like this was really early in the pandemic and, you know, Kate, our academy became this virtual experience, but you were not up in these helicopters, but you were able to get that amazing footage and video from your friend. Like, do you have any advice now that things are a little bit more back to normal, like about sourcing video or finding visual elements for stories?
Yeah, I definitely collaborate with the person you're doing the story on, especially during the pandemic. We couldn't go over to these people's houses and be like, okay, I'm going to film you washing your hands, or I'm going to film you putting on your mask. They can get B-roll that you might not be able to get if they're working someplace where it may be hard to film or get to. You can say, hey, on your phone, switch it to these certain settings. If you could film, you know, just take me through a typical day and kind of work them through the kind of shots you want, whether you want to be like, can you get a wide of you walking in through the store, but then as you reach this place, if you could film, and just collaborate with the person you're interviewing. I was lucky that Gerald is in media and he was able to film with a nice camera to get those nice aerial shots, but it can be anybody and anybody can film for you.
Mohammed, when you're talking to students about just kind of the visual elements of building a story, like what advice do you give them? Because especially with education, you know, sometimes students aren't always able to film in the school, or like, how do you work through those limitations?
Yeah, so when students are trying to tell a story, we base a lot of our stories around like a character. So like an interview like you did with Gerald, Nate, Kate. And a lot of students, like, it sounds great. Your story should be able to, like, we should be able to listen to it and tell it's a story. We should also be able to look at it and see that it's a story too. So it's really just like visually representing everything that you hear, because a lot of students, they get lazy with B-roll. They just put in things. They're just like, oh, I have a clip, I'm going to cover it. It's always best when students are really picky about their B-roll, and to be picky about your B-roll, you have to have enough B-roll. So when you're out in the field, making sure that you're prepared ahead of time about like what could happen, right? If you haven't done your interview yet, you should have still done enough research to know how the interview may go, what some of the responses may be based on your questions. And based on that, you should already have like a B-roll shot list. And if you've already done your interview, then you can go back again and see what has been said, maybe something you've missed, and just get as many shots as you can. Because when you go back and post, you're going to realize that maybe you weren't patient in a shot and it's a little shaky. Maybe somebody was walking in the background, it's a little bit distracting. So you want to be able to have options to be picky. And also you want to try to tell stories when you're in the field with your B-roll visually through sequencing. So like some of you guys already know sequencing. If you don't, we got lots of resources. You can check on Storymaker. I think you'll find a B-roll lesson about sequencing, but it's really just like showing that story. So having the close-ups, right? So like Kate's story, she had a close-up of the young man's hands. She had wide shots. So it's like having wide shots, having close-ups, having medium shots, having a variety of kinds of shots to tell a story visually. It's usually what advice I would pretty much give to most students.
That's great advice, Mohammad. And Kate, like there are certain things we tell people to avoid. So Mohammad just went through a lot of great things to do, but are there some don'ts? Like one thing we discourage is like using stock footage, those types of things. Like really get out there and get your own footage. Like Kate, are there things you learned from like mishaps in the field with your equipment, audio, visual things to like for people to avoid?
Yeah, I think definitely what Mohammad said, preparing for your interview, doing pre-interviews, kind of knowing what's going to happen when you go into the interview, being prepared and knowing your questions and kind of the direction you want to take the conversation. And also on the flip side, being flexible. I've been in interviews where I've gone in thinking my story is going to be this and this and this. This is the beginning, middle, end. But then you ask a question and you get the answer that you're not expecting. And you're like, oh, you build on that idea. So you kind of have a wide cast net over this story and you can kind of go with any direction. Another big thing is to check your equipment before you go out. There have been many a times where, oh no, this battery is in charge. Oh no, I forgot this lens. Oh no, my tripod doesn't work. But just double checking your gear, maybe even making a list, double checking that before you go out is a big thing that I've learned throughout the years.
What about using sort of data, research, statistics? I think Kate, in your story, you had like some cool graphs just showing the real drop off in tourism. How do you go about that as you're approaching a story? Because you want that great human story and the people, but also the research.
Yeah, in that story, it was hard for me to find an expert on the topic since things were constantly changing and no information was really solid enough for me to work on the story and for it to be published because things could change in a day. So I kind of had to become my own expert. So I kind of had to go through these big spreadsheets with lots of information, looking for correct information and fact checking all of that and composing it into that middle stand-up that you see. That was kind of like my expert portion of taking this human and Gerald's story, but also connecting it to the big picture and then kind of putting it back into Gerald's story. So yeah, just lots of research and making sure that the information that you find is factual and correct.
Yeah, I could double down on what Kate had to say. So like, remember, your goal is to tell a great story, but our goal is also to tell a nonfiction story, right? So we're not just trying to make something up. And what data can do is it can be used as another tool to help focus your story even more. So sometimes you may not know where things are going, but if you have a piece of data, it can help you have a talking point. It can help you bring up a visual, but it can also help some audience, some people in the audience. Some people care about the story. Some people care about the characters. Some people care about the numbers. Some people care about the visuals. So it's like using every tool you can to kind of like grab your audience. Some people are going to look at Kate's story and the only thing they're going to remember is the numbers, and that's fine. So it's good that you had some sort of data for them to grab onto. And some people are going to care about the visuals, but again, give them those different ways to get hooked in and want to be excited to share your story with others because they learned something. or they just enjoyed it.
And we do have a question from Dakota in the chat about how you created those graphics, Kate. I think, no, you can answer it. I think those look like SRL graphics to me. Did we help you with those, or did you make those graphics in the story?
Yeah, that was not me at all. It was actually my group leader during the 2020 Academy was Victor. And I kind of had these really, hi Victor, I had these really badly made graphics because I am not a graphic person. I don't have a good artistic eye. So Victor's like, let me help, just give me your information and kind of like what you're thinking of having up at that time during the stand-up, and kind of working with Victor. So that was all Victor. I just provided the information and he made the cool movie graphics. I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah, I'm not really very savvy with graphics either, but Mohammed, do we have any recommendations for people who are maybe new to this? Like, I know we use a tool for kind of new or easy tool like Canva or other things. Like, do you have any other tips or advice for people who maybe aren't as graphic savvy?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I like old school graphics. If you don't know how to make graphics on a computer, it looks better if you just draw it out or do something creative, do something with stop motion. If you don't know how to do things digitally, I think most kids are comfortable with doing something just creative, right? So I think it's better to do something cool than to have like a bad digital graphic. I like graphics and parts of stories that feel like tangible, right? So, I mean, everybody knows, at least the young people, maybe you guys are too young to even like watch Casey Neistat, for example, on YouTube, but he draws out, he has a lot of like tangible graphics, tangible parts of his story. He'll just have little cutouts of things and he'll put it together. And like, I think that that's a great option for people who are really artistic, but don't know how to like translate that to a digital platform. And then if you don't know how to do either one, yeah, there is Canva. Yeah, there are options. There's also us. So just ask somebody to help you.
Yeah, and Tristan mentioned DaVinci Resolve in the chat too. So yeah, there are definitely tools you can use that are more like friendly to those of us who aren't graphics experts. I guess I do want to make sure we leave time for Q&A, especially since we have, a smaller group here. But just final, like, definite thing to hit in every medium, audio, print, video, like the fact-checking process. I guess to both of you, like, what should that look like, and how should you really make sure that you're checking and double checking everything?
I think for me in that story, it was a lot of word of mouth, hearing from people, but then thinking, I don't know if that's completely right, because that can happen through word of mouth. Details can be changed. So it's going through, I used a lot of government sites that provided provided numbers on the tourism stuff, and also, checking other sources and making sure that everything seems right, but then also going in through that second time to find trustworthy sources to get your information from.
Yeah, I would also add that I personally, when I work with students on projects, I learn something new. If it's about science, if it's about history, whatever it is, if it's about something happening in their local community, I learn something new. But at the same time, I think that students don't pursue something that's maybe too far outside of your scope of like understanding. So if don't pursue a topic, for example, we talk a lot about like climate change and big issues happening in the world. It may be hard for you to fact check something that's so big. So if you can localize it, if you can shrink it, if you can simplify it, then it'll be easier for you to fact check, because you can have an actual understanding of what is happening and what is right in front of you, because it may be happening right in your community and you may have witnesses of what's happening in your community. So try to like have a scope of a story that's doable for you to understand and learn about and grow from, but at the same time isn't too far, if that makes sense. I think that would help for students. That helps for me.
Yeah, the best advice I heard is like, when in doubt, leave it out. Like, if you don't know where that source is, or you can't really track it down, then just cut that item. Okay, Christine, I don't know how we are in time. I do want to just leave space for people to ask questions and have more interaction. So do you want to open the floor?
Yeah, we have about 15 more minutes, so plenty of time for questions. So if you have a question, you can either drop it in the chat, or if you could also maybe, like, if you're at the beginning of an idea, if you want to talk something through, like you have a topic in mind but want to like workshop how you get to a story, other things like that, that's also something we can use this time for. And so we'll like take a minute, think about kind of if there's things you'd like to talk about. You could also use the raise hand function if you'd rather, and then you can just kind of share out loud. And in the meantime, kind of as you're thinking about that stuff, I have a question, and this is maybe for Kate, but I think also Marie and Mohammed, you might have some thoughts. Obviously, like the themes, my education, my future, there's a lot of different types of tensions around some of those topics right now. We know reporting as a student journalist can be like uniquely challenging, because if you're trying to report on maybe something that's happening in your school or administration, or there's like there can be more roadblocks for students. And I wonder if you might be able to talk about like what's been important in navigating sort of those challenges as a student journalist, and for Mohammed and Marie, maybe what you've seen with students you've worked with or schools. And maybe what folks might want to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely for me, there have been some times where I'm reaching out to an interview subject and they kind of don't take me as seriously because I am a student, I'm a younger person. So it's kind of help. I usually get help from my teacher as well to kind of CC her in the email so she can see what's going on, if there's anything she can do to help. But then I think a lot of it is being confident in yourself and very like professional. And I think that's what helps adults to take me seriously as a student journalist, but also finding help from adults like teachers and all of that.
That's great advice, Kate. I would just say I was not a student journalist, but I started as a journalist in my 20s, and people also wouldn't take me seriously. Sometimes it felt like, but I would say use that to your advantage. Like, you are serious, you are like doing a story, and if you know, sometimes people don't take you seriously, that's okay, that's on them. I would also tell students like that when you send an interview request via email, like professional journalists get those ignored all the time too, so just follow up with a phone call or email them again, and just like keep being politely persistent with people. And don't worry also, like if you've asked and called and whatever and they're not responsive and you've given them a deadline, then you've done your due diligence to try to include them in the story. You don't need someone to agree to be in the story to still write, to create a story. So I think just being like, you know, polite, professional, like Kate talked about, and yeah, like just understand that those roadblocks that student journalists hit, like every journalist is hitting those.
Yeah, I would add that it's funny that Kate mentioned that you CC teachers to try to get people to respond. I CC students to try to get people to respond. I try to shame adults and say, hey, I got these 2 kids on this email chain. They want to interview you. Because I think that young people don't realize that you have a lot more power than you think you do when you're young. People don't want to say no to you. So try to use being a student to your advantage as much as possible. And frame things. You take yourself seriously and be confident, but also be self-aware that you can frame like emails by saying things like, hey, I'm just a young person trying to learn something new. You know, you learn how to play the student role around these adults who want to act big and bad and smart. And so I think that that's something that you can do. Also, I know that Christine mentioned like there's some things happening in education that may be controversial for like students being uncomfortable to cover things happening maybe in their district or whatever. I would say that if you want to cover a topic that may be salacious, don't do it just to get attention. If you actually care about it, then that's all that matters. But don't try to pick a topic that you think other people care about or other people are going to be interested in. if you happen to be interested in a salacious topic that may be controversial in your district among teachers, it is what it is. Pursue it, but don't go out of your way to do that. Some of you guys may be interested in simple stories. You know, my education, my future can mean, like we said, so many different things. So do something that you actually want to do and that you actually care about, and don't do something that you think other people would be interested in caring about. This is your stories. You're telling things from your perspectives. We're trying to get unique stories, unique perspectives from angles that like we wouldn't think of anymore because we're not in high school anymore. So surprise us and show us things that we would never think about, that we can't and don't read about in the news.
Yeah.
I
just want to, somebody asked in the chat, it was just to me, so, but I'll just say, the question was, what if you don't have a camera or a tripod or a journalism program at your school? Is this just for economically well-off students? I would say absolutely not. Anyone can participate, and especially with print, I mean, anyone can write a story with audio and video now. I mean, I would say no, you don't need a fancy camera at all. Most people have a smartphone with, many people do, and or somebody in the class probably has a smartphone with a fantastic camera. There's amazing things that can be done. So I'd say if you have a tripod for a smartphone and a microphone, you can actually produce high quality audio and video now, and you do not need fancy DSLR cameras. Did you have you're raising your hand?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that. I again, I'm in San Francisco, and last summer I spent a couple of weeks with a giant commercial TV station. I won't name which one. And some reporters confided in me that there are times where they've actually recorded the story with their phone because they didn't want to take a fancy camera out in public in a questionable situation or a place where they thought they were not going to be safe. And they shot it with their phone, and no one knew the difference. So the phones are so good these days. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I just maybe it reminded me of an old hack I learned from a teacher a while ago, which is like if all you have is like a set of like headphones that have like with the wire, and they have like a little microphone, like how you like a lot of earbuds are like that. You can use that to increase the quality of your recording. Like if you're doing a voiceover or if you're doing an interview with someone, you can even just like kind of pin that to, like someone's shirt, stuff like that. So there are ways that you can do that. Also, this isn't everywhere, but some libraries will have programs where you can rent out equipment. So it's worthwhile checking to see not just your school library, but also like in your community, like your city library or county library might have something like that too. So that's worth a try to look at, because more libraries are doing that type of thing too.
Yeah, and I'll share in the chat, and we have some great resources in our Level Up series about how to use your phone and how to record B-roll with your phone. Like others have said, I have shot footage on my phone that is aired on television and used it for radio broadcast too. So yes, fortunately you don't need a ton of fancy equipment anymore. Still highly recommend tripods to stabilize shots, and also external microphones, but they are also very inexpensive.
I can also share that for these video submissions, it's just a 4-minute maximum. So when you're thinking about your story and thinking about kind of like fitting into that amount of time, that's something to kind of consider.
I would love to hear a story about the phone ban, Dakota. I think you kids need your phones taken away from you. So let me know more about how that goes. Adults do too. We're on our phones too much too. We need a universal phone ban.
Yeah, Dakota, do you want to tell us more about your idea? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm in a coffee shop, so it might be a little bit loud, but I kind of want to talk about the safety aspect and how, like, if there was an emergency in the school, how that would be a problem, because obviously administration can't be calling every parent at once. So I think it's a safety issue to be removing them from schools. I understand maybe like having kids put them away and maybe there's consequences, which we already have, but I think it's a big safety issue. And I think a lot of kids at my school could talk about that if I interviewed them.
Yeah, that's already a great angle. I had never thought about that. So you're already on to something. Good, Dakota. Good luck with that.
Yeah, and are you in Michigan, Dakota?
Yeah, I go to the school that Mr. Conrad teaches at.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like you're off to a really good start. Anyone else? Thoughts, ideas, questions? Final advice, maybe? Marie, Mohammed, Kate.
I would just say talk to people in your community. That's how I feel I've gotten almost all of my story ideas, talking to my dad. He's a school principal, so hearing what's happening there with education, but also just like social media is sometimes a bad thing, but social media is sometimes where I found out about a story about a shark ambassador who actually got attacked by a shark, and that's what inspired him to be a shark ambassador. He is really big on social media. He's verified and all of that, and that's how I kind of found out about that. So just keep an open ear, open eyes while you're going through your week, talking to people and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Kate. That's how I always operated. It's just, listen to people, talk to people, bring your curiosity, think about stuff you're interested in. Anything you would add, Mohammed?
Yeah, I mean, I think of journalism always as an excuse to learn new things. So I try to pick stories where you can learn something, right? It could be a new perspective. It could be a new, like, something that's happening that you didn't even know happens. So try to pick something that you don't know a lot about so that you can also just learn something too. You don't want to pick something that's like, some students are like, they pick something that they're already such a part of, and like, that's great too, because you have an inside perspective, but it's also fun to just kind of do something that you don't know anything about. And worst case scenario, your story doesn't end up the way you wanted to, but you learn something new. So it's a win-win situation.
Awesome. Well, thank you all three for so much great advice and a great conversation. And thanks to everyone for spending a little bit of your day with us. Before we go, I want to share a couple of things as next steps. So first is if maybe this session is giving you some ideas, but you need a couple days to think about it or don't want to talk about it more with folks, we're offering some one-on-one meetings. So this Thursday in the afternoon, Eastern time, I'll be there to help just kind of like bounce ideas off of. Sometimes I find it hard to like share kind of my like baby ideas in a big group. So if you'd rather talk one-on-one, feel free to find a time that works for you. And then you can also always send us an email if you have questions. This is the email address in the chat. I'm going to also send all of this stuff in a follow-up email. And I know there are a lot of links to some of our resources in StoryMaker. That really goes through like every single part of the process. So it's a really great place to start, especially if you haven't had a lot of experience in journalism, or if you don't have a journalism program at your school, then those can be really good resources to kind of give a foundation as you get started. And yeah, we hope everyone submits something. The deadline is in December, so you still have a lot of time to kind of work on these projects throughout. And whether you choose video or audio or print, I think everyone has so many good things to think about and share, and perspectives that are happening right in your very own communities. Like Kate was saying, like you all are the experts, like you're living education in the places where you are, and you and your friends and like the people that you interact with all the time, like are representative of your education in your future. So I think there's so much good stuff to come. I know I'm really excited to watch all of these kind of after the deadline passes. And one last thing, we will be having another set of workshops like this later in November, and that will be more focused on sort of like putting your story together The editing process, it'll be kind of similar to this, like things to think about as you're going through that process, but more focused on the later part of that. So we hope you'll join us for those too, and we'll send, you can sign up on our workshops page in the studentjournalismchallenge.org, and we'll also send that link in the follow-up email. But yeah, that is it for today. Thanks again, Marie, Kate, and Mohammed, and everyone for coming. Hope you have a great rest of your day or evening, depending where you are. Bye.